On behalf of the National Identification Authority, I want to take the opportunity offered by the press conference that just ended by the National Democratic Congress to highlight a number of responses that are warranted in order to set the record straight and to assure the good people of this country that the National Identification Authority is not involved in any criminal enterprise, and that the National Identification Authority has acted with utmost integrity and done all that it has done with the best interest of Ghana, the nation Ghana, at heart. I want to assure the people of this country that the National Identification Authority is led by a governing board comprising women and men of great integrity, experience, and decency. Men and women who are drawn from the ranks of academia and the critical institutions of state that are involved in identity management and or interested in identity management in this country. And so, for example, the authority's governing board includes the chief executive of the statistical service, the government statistician. It includes the chief executive of the Social Security and National Insurance Trust. It includes, that's the Director General of Senate. It includes the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority. It also includes the Registrar of the Births and Deaths Registry. And it also includes the Controller General of the Ghana Immigration Service. And last but not least, in terms of institutional representation, the Chief Executive of the National Health Insurance Authority. It is chaired by an eminent Ghanaian, and it has a professor of law from the University of Ghana Business School as a member, as well as a professor of agricultural economics from Central University, also serving as a member, amongst others. These are men and women whose integrity, whose dedication to service in this country cannot, by any stretch of the imagination, be challenged or undermined. We are all in the business of putting our shoulders to the wheel in the service of our dear nation. Foremost amongst them being a disturbing allegation that the National Identification Authority is in concert with the Electoral Commission embarked on an election rigging agenda in order to benefit the new patriotic party, and most disturbingly, to disenfranchise a significant portion of the Ghanaian populace from their right to exercise their franchise. I want to assure the good people of this country that the National Identification Authority is not involved in any such criminal design or enterprise with the Electoral Commission, with the government of Ghana, or with any person or entity howsoever described. There is, in short, no such conspiracy. And perhaps any person or institution alleging such a criminal conspiracy has a duty to report same to the police. A second disturbing allegation that is made relates to the exclusion of the voter ID card as the principal, one of the two principal requirements for registering for the Ghana card. the exclusion of the voter ID card as a Ghana card registration requirement. Ladies and gentlemen, the exclusion of the voter ID card was both legal and legitimate, having been passed by the Parliament of this Republic and on sound grounds. It cannot be that the exclusion was both illegal and illegitimate. Indeed, the amendment of Section 8 of Act 750 to exclude the voter ID card, the driver's license, the baptismal certificates, and weighing cards as eligible documents for acquiring the Ghana card was wholly supported by the entire plenary of the Parliament of this Republic. Indeed, there was not a whimper of opposition or protest from any member of Parliament, both opposition and minority, government and minority, when the matter went to the floor of Parliament for deliberation. Again, indeed, every single member of Parliament who spoke on that occasion spoke in favor of the amendment to exclude those documents. And I can remember in particular the Honorable Ahmed, MP for Time. I remember Honorable Ama Kofi-Boa, and I also remember Honorable Inusa Fuseni, all of whom spoke very passionately in favor of the amendment. In the circumstances, the amendments received the unqualified endorsement of the minority MPs in Parliament and therefore the entire unanimous endorsement of Parliament. Another issue that was raised in the NDC press conference today that warrants comment is that by relying exclusively on the Ghana card and passports, the NIA is somehow disenfranchising the people of Ghana, because presumably the majority of people cannot easily register. Well, first of all, let me say that the reliance on the Ghana card and passport was again supported by the NDC, and LI 2111 passed in the year 2012. The Ghana card is the only ID card to be required and to be produced whenever identity must be established. And there are 17 mandatory uses of the Ghana card, which is to say that there are 17 circumstances under which a person cannot access services unless they provide the Ghana card. Those 17 mandatory uses include application for an issuance of a passport, application for an issuance of a driver's license, the opening of an individual or personal bank account, the purchase of insurance policies, purchase, transfer, and registration of land by an individual or a connected transaction subject to the provisions of other enactments, transactions pertaining to individuals in respect of pensions, transactions specified under the National Health Insurance Scheme, transactions that have social security implications, consumer credit transactions, registration of voters, payment of taxes, registration of SIM cards, applications for public or government services, facilities, approvals, permissions, or benefits, and any other transaction which the NIA may determine and publish in the Gazette. Some suggestion has also been made that the instant issuance strategy adopted by the National Identification Authority has somehow failed. We beg to differ. On the contrary, the evidence shows that it has been a remarkable success. Over 70% of cards are actually being issued instantly. What it is that between July 2009, during President Kufuor's time, and January 2017, the National Identification Authority issued a total of 900,000 cards only during the entire period between 2008 and January 2017. Only 900,000, less than 1 million cards were issued. Compare that with a situation where between 29th April 2019, when the mass registration exercise began, and 20th March 2020, when the mass registration exercise was truncated, NIA as an authority had issued 7,091,769 cards. That cannot be described as a failure. The instant card issuance is our first and preferred option. It is part of a three-pronged approach. Instant issuance is used where there is strong network connectivity. Where network connectivity does not aid the enterprise of printing cards, we have resort to the second option, which is deferred printing or delayed printing. There we print the cards overnight, usually at a print farm. We assemble, batch them, and take them to the registration centers for distribution the next day or at the earliest opportunity. In the third instance, where the first two options are not available to us, we resort to centralized printing, where our giant printers at the headquarters would enable us print cards, thousands of them overnight, where we run a 24-hour shift and take them to the registration centers. It is true that we have a considerable backlog. We had a considerable backlog of both unprinted cards and cards that had been printed but not issued. But the story doesn't end there, and I'll come to that, how we propose to deal with the matter. I should say that there has not been a suppression of registration in so-called NDC strongholds. The National Identification Authority does not take into account any concept of strongholds in the performance of its duties. We take our statistics, population data from Statistical Service. We may make mistakes as a human institution, but there is definitely no political agenda to how we perform our duties. 50% of all the staff we engage in the registration exercise are recruited from the local communities, from the regions. The very managers of the process, those who control the resources, those in whose care the consumables, the registration forms, the registration center management processes are entrusted, those are locals whose duty it is to manage and ensure the success of the exercise. They cannot be persons who would work against their own interests or be deemed to be persons who would work against the interests of themselves and their own people. In considering where to set up registration centers, we are guided by law. It is the law that requires that we use the last polling centers or stations used by the Electoral Commission in the last presidential and parliamentary elections. To the extent possible, we do that, but we cannot use all of them because we don't have the resources. It therefore becomes necessary to conduct surveys of the many registration centers in a particular constituency and select the best in terms of network connectivity, secure storage facilities, ample space for people to queue, opportunities to mount canopies, erect all other structures that may be necessary. We take a variety of factors into account. Political advantage is not one of those. There is some concern also expressed about the sworn oath option. It is true that this country had, until the commencement of the mass registration exercise, less than 300 commissioners for oaths. And it is true that there are very few magistrates across the country. When we came to that realization, and in light of the legal requirement that only birth certificate and passport be recognized as valid documents for registration, it became necessary to give the majority of Ghanaians who lack these two primary documents the opportunity to register without any difficulty. Of course, with one condition, that the people of this country must go through that minimal fatigue in establishing the bona fides of their claim to Ghanaian citizenship. And anyone who is a Ghanaian ought to be able to have at least a relative who has registered and been issued with the Ghana card, having provided one of these documents, or find two people who fit a certain criteria, living in the communities, who know him or her and can identify that person to be a Ghanaian, vouching for them. Through this process, over 70% of all the people who have registered for the Ghana card to date, numbering over 11.6 million, have come under this approach. I must also add that any suggestion that the vouching for process has been a failure or has resulted in the disenfranchisement of sections of Ghanaians, the Ghanaian populace, or somehow that it has been elitist, is unfounded. Indeed, the evidence establishes that the majority of persons resorting to the vouching for process successfully are farmers, students, retail market traders, the unemployed, teachers, business men and women, tailors and dressmakers, hairdressers, barbers and beauticians, retired persons, bricklayers, carpenters, and the like. It is a mixed bag, and there are people who are in the white-collar professions who also lack passports or birth certificates. I should add at this point also that the classes of persons we are registering at the moment are Ghanaians aged 15 years and above. It was planned that after the mass registration exercise, we would use the equipment and the personnel, the very competent personnel that we have, those who have distinguished themselves, to establish our regional, municipal, and district offices. And that these officers will go round the schools and kindergartens and daycare centers and hospital wards and register Ghanaians who are younger than 15, as well as those Ghanaians who would have been missed during the mass registration exercise. The continuous registration process should enable all those segments of the population that were missed to be captured. So younger Ghanaians and those who could not register earlier. I must add that in recognition of the small numbers of commissioners for oaths throughout the country, we considered it necessary to request the Judicial Service of Ghana to recruit and train a large number of commissioners for oaths to assist us in ensuring that at every single registration center there would be at least one commissioner for oaths on a daily basis. And that's what we did. Her Ladyship, the Chief Justice, graciously agreed, and the Judicial Service trained approximately 1,400, I think 1,400 and something commissioners for oaths who were deployed throughout the registration period. Every center had a minimum of one commissioner for oaths. There were times, indeed, when a commissioner for oath may be unwell, indisposed, and you may have a queue forming and lasting longer, but that's just the reality of working in the public sector in our circumstance. That sometimes somebody may be late, that sometimes somebody may, but we took appropriate action on each occasion that situations came to our attention to address administrative matters that came up. The point I'm making, ladies and gentlemen, is that we did not disenfranchise or disadvantage any class or region of people because of the use of the commissioners for oaths or the vouching for process. The argument has been made that it slowed the process. That may very well be so. But it was necessary to ensure that we invested as much energy and attention in establishing the integrity of the claims to Ghanaianness of every single person who claimed to be a Ghanaian, that we protect the frontiers of our citizenship. And I think that most Ghanaians rose to the occasion and had no difficulty vouching for or being vouched for others truthfully. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2008, I had a privilege of serving as Executive Secretary of the National Identification Authority. I took over from my very able predecessor, Professor NDC. At the time, we commenced the mass registration exercise, not in the Greater Accra region, but in the Central region. From the Central region, I continued the exercise in the Western region, and then to the Eastern region, and then to the Western region. Volta region. After the Volta region, the exercise stalled for some time. When it recommenced, it began in the Greater Accra region before going to Ashanti region and eventually to the rest of the country and then in the northern regions. There is no magic, no formula that is evil, and no intent that is inappropriate. Not then and not now. This time, we decided to go anti-clockwise. From Greater Accra, we went to the Volta region, and then to the upper, to Oti, and then the northern regions, northern, northeast, and Savannah, and we moved to Upper East, Upper West, came down to Brong, to Bono East, and then to Ahafo. We combined Bono East, and Ahafo with the Upper West and Upper East. That combination was a function of arithmetic. Statistically, the population sizes was the single most determining factor. We had sent the entire equipment strength that we had used in the Greater Accra region to the Volta region for our exercise. We had used the same strength to the Oti region. And by the time we were getting further up north, we, based on the population sizes, we made a decision to combine, to cluster some of the regions into one. and to undertake the exercise. The argument has also been made and needs to be responded to that somehow the National Identification Authority mobilized an unprecedented number of equipment and personnel into the so-called MPP strongholds. That is not true. It is true that we took a large number of equipment and personnel into the Ashanti region and also into the Eastern region. But it is not because of political advantage, and they were not the only regions for which this arrangement was made. About June 2019, it was determined that it would be necessary to scale up the mass registration exercise because the numbers of equipment we had expected to start the exercise with right from the beginning had not arrived. We didn't have the full complement of equipment. We needed 2,500 machines. We had just 50 machines. Instead of establishing 750 registration centers, we established 350 registration centers in Accra East and subsequently Accra West. Accra West and subsequently Accra East. And it was that same strength that we took to the Volta region and to Oti and the others. When we decided that it was necessary to scale up because of the low figures we were registering, we made the appropriate representation and the government agreed to support that. Government supported with the injection of what has been described as the unprecedented number of equipment. By the time these equipment arrived, we were already in the month of October. The equipment had to be imported from outside Ghana. There's a supply chain arrangement. It went through a whole lot of processes. And even the California fires of 2019 affected the arrival of the iris cameras, and alternative arrangements had to be made. These equipment arrived, had to be assembled, and had software loaded onto them and then transported. Some of them were added to the registration exercise in the Upper East, Upper West, Bono East, and Ahafo regions. By the time we were going into Ashanti region in December 2019, all those equipments had been fully readied and could therefore be mobilized. The additional personnel that needed to be trained to handle these machines have then been fully trained, and therefore they were deployed. That explains why we were able to achieve a throughput of about 136,000 on some days in the month of December and early January. It was that same capacity that we took to Western region, Western North, and Central region. And that is why the registration figures in the Central region and Western North, for example, quite significant. And it was that same strength that we took into the Eastern region. It was that same strength that we would have taken back into the Greater Accra region to do a mop-up in the month of April after the mass registration exercise had ended in the Eastern region on the 27th of March. That capacity would also have enabled us, as per our plan, to undertake mop-up exercises in the 5 regions where we had the least registration results. I'm speaking specifically of Upper East, Upper West, Ahafo, Bono East, and Bono regions. We would have undertaken a mop-up in Greater Accra, followed by a mop-up in these 5 regions in order to boost the numbers. Our expectation was that by the end of March, we would have achieved 12.2 million registrations, and by the end of June, through the mop-up, May and June, through the mop-up, we would have achieved over 16 million registrations. We do not know, and we do not use election statistics. We did not target 17 million because our processes were not aimed at registering just the electorate. Our processes were aimed at registering Ghanaians aged 15 and above. And a mass registration exercise has never been meant to register 100% of the population. In our case, given the equipment size, we aimed at achieving the registration of 80%. We did not achieve that in virtually all the regions for the reasons that I have outlined. But with the increased or invigorated technical capacity and the growing experience of our staff, some of whom were doing about 65 registrations per day instead of the minimum requirement of 30 per day, we were on the roll and we were going to achieve our target of registering about 16 million by the end of June. Ladies and gentlemen, NRA is not part of the election management architecture or scheme of this country. We have taken the time to print all the cards that have been, most of the cards that have been in backlog. At the moment, about 3,683,955 cards are ready to be issued to Ghanaians. These are cards that had been printed all along the way, and the bulk of them printed since the COVID-19 lockdown. We are ready to go back when the situation permits, when the pandemic abates, to issue the cards to the good people of this country who have not had their cards. Some cards are still in various stages of adjudication. These are cards of Ghanaians who had provided contradictory information, changing their names without authorization or gazette notification, provided conflicting dates of birth between previous registration data and the data that they have provided in the current registration, or somehow provided information that led the system to consider the application as somehow problematic and therefore putting them in a separate queue to be adjudicated. The numbers of cases in adjudication have considerably come down, and at the moment, very little of it remains to be handled. So, ladies and gentlemen, the truth of the matter is just what I've stated. There is no diabolical plan, no conspiracy, no improper motives, just pure, honest, decent work being done by a large army of dedicated Ghanaians who are called upon to fulfill a mandate entrusted to them by law. When the pandemic abates, NIA intends to get back to work. The management has made recommendations to the governing board. NIA is ruled by a governing board. It is not the executive secretary who makes decisions as to when to start or stop any process. It is not the management that makes the decision as to how and where to go. We've made recommendations. When the governing board directs us, we will go back to the eastern region and complete the truncated process. When we finish the registration in the eastern region, we will come back to Greater Accra and do a mop-up for about 2 weeks. During that period, we shall issue to Ghanaians in Greater Accra the cards that have not been issued. We will then go to the 5 regions that had the least numbers of registration results. I am talking about Upper East, Upper West, Bono East, and Ahafo. These 5 regions deserve special attention by way of a mop-up, during which period we will not only register those who were unable to be captured, but also issue the cards that have been printed to those whose cards are ready. The small numbers of people across the country whose cards are in various stages of adjudication, the adjudication will continue, and as soon as the cards are ready, they will be issued to them. They will be issued to them also through the permanent regional, municipal, and district offices, which we had intended to establish by April, but which we will establish as soon as the pandemic abates. We will use the unprecedented, the invigorated technical capacity that we now have and the experienced and dedicated staff to establish these offices as a permanent feature to provide registration services to Ghanaians. As part of the plan, if approved by the governing board, NIA will also issue the cards and register new Ghanaians through the co-location arrangements we intend to establish with our cognate institutions such as the National Health Insurance Authority, the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority, the Social Security and National Insurance Trust, GRA, and the Births and Deaths Registry. At such places, Ghanaians who could not register could get registered. And at our permanent registration offices, permanent NIA offices across the regions, all 16 regions of this country, Ghanaians could always go and get registered. There will be nothing useful to be gained by NIA in keeping anybody's Ghana card. Indeed, if Ghanaians do not register for the Ghana card and Ghanaians do not make use of the Ghana card, it is the Ghanaian economy that will suffer. The intention of the law that this Ghana card is to be used for social, economic, and political purposes. That is what the law provides. And it is imperative that we, as managers of the process, ensure that every Ghanaian gets his or her Ghana card, and very soon. And so we will do all that is necessary and reasonable to ensure that this goal is achieved. And then we can also embark on the registration of Ghanaians in the diaspora as again by law provided. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by assuring each and every Ghanaian that the National Identification Authority is not embarked upon anything improper, illegal, or illegitimate. On the contrary, the National Identification Authority is engaged in all that is noble and wholesome, all that is decent and well considered in the interest of this great country of ours. Thank you for listening.